Again, I want to welcome everyone here today. We have a seat up front here if someone would like it. I'm not going to sit anymore, so if you'd like, you get a pretty good spot here, and I can scooch back in the corner. Feel free. Membership, we ended 2015 with 10 individual, 11 family, 4 patron, 2 charter, 2 in-kind members, 15 senior student members, and 11 courtesy members. Courtesy members are other historical societies in the area to whom we send our gazette and maintain a relationship to share manuscripts, artifacts, and photographs. So we receive some of their bulletins and they receive our bulletins as well. So it's a nice way of keeping in touch with our friends and neighbors. Our King of Prussia Gazette is on track again for 2016. That is distributed to members, as Shirley mentioned. Many interesting stories to come this year. We also maintain a website, kophistory.org, and you can follow us on Facebook at King of Prussia Historical Society. Keep in mind that that's where you're going to see some of the updates and some of the things that we come up with kind of on the spur of the moment. That's where we'll post it, and if we have something fun and interesting, you'll see it on Facebook first. I wanted to say something about membership for a moment, because really everything that we do here, we're a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation dependent entirely upon our membership for support, for financial support. So if you walk out of here today, and I'm glad to see some new faces, thank you so much for coming. And I know the Inn is a great draw, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But I kind of sound like a PBS commercial right now. We really do need your support. So if you like what you see in here today, please consider joining. We would love to have you on board. We have a number of very aggressive projects this year that we're taking on that we really need some volunteers for as well, and they're fun projects. You're not left out to go make it happen. You're guided through it, and we just need some folks to do some legwork and whatnot, but we try and make it fun. We are again going to apply for the Board of Community Assistance Grant, asking for funds to produce a timeline brochure for the King of Prussia Inn so they can hand it out to guests and members of the Chamber of Commerce, etc. And people that wander up and knock on the door and say, I know this is the King of Prussia Inn, can you tell me something about it? So we wanted to make that happen. Also, if you're familiar with the Pennsylvania historical markers, I just helped put one in Devon for the Devon Horse Show. I'm going to be talking to the board of directors here to have one done here. So the next board meeting, I'll be here to present the Pennsylvania historical marker, sometimes called blue and gold markers. You see them, large markers commemorating a person, a place, or an event. And they're all over Pennsylvania. They're very hard to get. They don't just hand them out. You have to qualify, but I think this building in history qualifies over and over for that. So we're going to try and make that happen with their approval. Keystone markers, historical markers are neither restrictive. It doesn't matter what color you paint your building. They're not going to come along and say, you got to change that roof line and that kind of thing. They're not protective either. They will not protect the building from the wrecking ball. They won't protect it from anything, really. It's just, again, a commemoration of an event or a place or a person significant in Pennsylvania history. Last year, we received money for 3 keystone markers. There's one on Gulf Road right next to the Sunoco station. It's broken and it's in the wrong place. So that's one of the ones we're going to, it says Norristown 3 miles. It was actually on the northbound side of 202 years ago, and when it got broken, I guess they just moved it when they were widening the road and put it there. But we'd like to put one there. This is Valley Forge 3 miles. Also, I was talking to the township not too long ago, and they suggested one by Solon Boulevard. because of all the activity with the Chester Valley Trail crossing 202 there. They thought that would be a nice place. So between us, we're going to get 3 of them cast. There's some issues right now with the company at Spring City that casts the markers, so we're held up a little bit there, but we're going to make that happen next year in 2016, one way or another. The other thing we're doing is we're producing a timeline brochure that we're going to distribute to the schools, because we all know, any old timers here understand the changes that have taken place here over the years, and it's pretty dramatic. Even month to month now, things change. So we want to bring it back to how it was originally, and distribute that to the school district and to anyone else that's interested in learning a little bit about our roots. That's all I have. We're going to jump right into the presentation. If you've had a chance to read this, this was a book called Country Walks.
Excuse me. Could you explain more the difference between the PHMC marker and the Keystone marker? Do we have a picture? I don't think the fellow who's asking about it quite.
Good question. That was a question in my mind as well.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
The Keystone marker commemorates a town. That's a PennDOT marker, and it's generally on a roadway commemorating a town in the area. They're very small, they're shaped like keystones, and it'll say King of Prussia, and for instance, it'll say Norristown in small letters, Norristown 3 miles ahead, that kind of thing. But they are road markers as opposed to the blue and gold marker, which again has lengthy wording to commemorate a person, a place, or an event. Battle of the Clouds just went up on Sweetsford Road in Chester County to commemorate that near Malvern. There's one on Valley Forge Road in front of the Baptist Church commemorating that. Again, I did one in Devon for the Devon Horse Show, recognizing that as a national event. So they're more of.
So do you have, I know there's the approval process for the PHMC marker. Are they still producing the Keystone markers?
No, they're not.
Okay.
That's privately done now through the Pennsylvania Keystone Marker Preservation Trust. So we're working in conjunction with them and with the township to restore the old marker and put new ones up. They did just put one up that they had over by Wegmans, over by Guthrie Road.
So are they or aren't they making new ones if somebody wants one?
Privately, they're being made. The state doesn't. The state handed over the markers. They didn't have the money for it, so they handed it over to this private company, that this Keystone Marker Preservation Trust.
So you can get it done through them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Look them up on the web, and or see me, and I'll give you some local contacts for it. There are some people that are involved in there with Radnor Historical Society that can get you some information.
So they are still doing it, it's just not through the state, it's
Correct.
through the trust?
Correct.
So anybody who wants to do it and wants to pay for it and work with them can do it, is that right?
Yes, exactly. You have to raise private funding, and the deal was with Upper Merion, if we would raise the funds to have them produced, they would install them and maintain them.
Can I add something? But they do have criteria that they adhere to.
Oh, yeah,
Somebody can't on their own say, let's put one up. They have to follow
Okay.
some historical,
Protocol, major protocol.
yeah.
And it sounds like you have 3 here in the King of Prussia area, is that what I heard?
There were 2. There are going to be 3.
Okay.
There's one right now at on Gulf Road by the Sunoco station. That's going to be replaced.
And it just says King of Prussia?
It says King of Prussia, and then up above in small letters it will say Valley Forge 3 miles.
Right.
We'll have one on the northbound side
Yes.
of 202, and there's now one on Sweetsford Road by Guthrie. It's one that they had, and it's kind of close. It says Paoli 3 miles. So it's pretty close to where it was.
But it really just says King of Prussia on each one with some
Yes.
additional.
No,
verbiage.
it'll say King of Prussia named after the Prince Frederick of Prussia after a inn that stood here, something like that.
Sometimes they'll give you a little background if there's room.
Okay, yeah, I asked because I see others, and I'm from Phoenixville, and I think I've seen some there that need help or are broken, and so the more information I have, the better.
See me afterwards and I'll give you some local contacts that can get the ball rolling
Thank
for
you.
you. Any more questions? We are going to talk today, why aren't you going? About a brief history of the King of Prussia Inn. Here we are at one of the most iconic structures ever. It was photographed. It was drawn. It was painted. One of the most amazing projects in Pennsylvania history was picking up this 550-ton building that you're sitting in right now and moving it a half a mile, intact. Let's talk about that. The first big question is when. If we can examine, there's my cursor. If we can examine this 1709 out on the sign in the hallway, you will see that the 0 was a 6. And it appears that they just painted it on there to draw attention to the building and, oh, it's old and it's historic, and that's not true. It wasn't 1709, it was 1769. I'm sorry. Let's go back to 1719, the Reese family. William Reese bought land and right along the Sweetsburg Road from his father Griffith and built his house. This is probably not exactly what it looked like. It's an artist's rendering. The sign would not have been there, but it's close. It's close to this portion right here that we're sitting in. Probably a frame structure at first. So this came a little bit later. This is 1769. I'm sorry about that being cut off at the top. The Tavern of William Reese Jr. Now, this is a wood structure, and this is the tavern that we're sitting in now. Had the open hearth and places for food and drink. What you would have would be very hearty meals in a big pot on a crane over the fire, probably never emptied. Probably just kept adding to it and adding to it over time. Kind of interesting when you think about how people ate back then in a tavern situation. And the food probably came later. There was a drinking establishment prior to being a tavern. 1790 to 1830. Here's the original section that we're in now. I'm sorry about that. I don't have my cursor, my clicker. The new section was added. And if you go outside, you'll notice that it was made of King of Prussia marble. When they took the plaster off, they realized it was a marble addition. And I'll show you something interesting about that with this aerial shot of King of Prussia from 1928. Here's the King of Prussia Inn right here. Okay, this is Sweetsford Road. This is Gulf Road in a little bit different configuration than it was. All right, this is King of Prussia Road that came all the way in. You see the Chester Valley Railroad and
That's where Home Depot is now, right?
yes, I'm sorry, I'm having a heck of a time with this. Home Depot's over here. but the Trenton cutoff is here, and you used to go underneath. Right up here, at the very top of the page, is Thomas Reese's house, William's brother. They purchased contiguous land and built the homes almost at the same time. The marble quarry was on that property. So the section that you saw, and I do apologize for this, this is really bad. The section that you see when you leave was added from that quarry.
And does that include the hallway? Was the hallway part of the addition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see it cuts off right at this wall.
Okay, that's what I thought.
A couple of other things about this picture that are interesting. You can see the activating the cursors. What's the problem? You can see that the railroad chose this line. The roadway bisected the valley, and the power lines came up from the Conowingo Dam to Bridgeport. All selected this beautiful valley. And why was that? Well, it's the same reason that the Swedes and the Welsh settled here. It was fertile soil. And why was it fertile soil? Because there was limestone underneath. And limestone maintains a pH neutral soil, and limestone is soft, so it breaks down faster. This isn't called the Great Valley for no reason. It's because for miles and miles and miles you have flat land that can be farmed. And as you can see from this picture, can be used for transportation of and for many things.
How come I got all the clay in my house, though?
Dig down, it's there.
It's there, okay.
And we're going to find out later that it's also the reason that the roadways all came together here. And the growth began exponentially because this was a great place for the roadways to connect. I think we're going to do a program on that next year. So here's your mid-19th century plan. The second floor porch was added and stucco on the outside, or plaster on the outside. Very little happened interior, except that it was modernized. You can see in the lower left the bar room where half of you were sitting, and of course the kitchen here. And I mentioned before that the back porch was covered in, enclosed to allow for more room in the kitchen. Let's go to the 18th century and see what was happening here. It's a wonderful iconic picture of how life was in King of Prussia. You see the carriage shed to the left, the spring house and wash house next to that. King of Prussia Inn, of course, not exactly as it looked around the time of the Revolution. As we just saw, the porch wasn't there and whatnot, but it's more an artist's concept, let's say, of how they thought the building looked. And of course, we have Dr. Pauling's house here, which is now the Tilted Kilt. About the only building that remains of original King of Prussia right there. And the barns and various outbuildings that made up the town. Now, what's interesting is what these folks are doing here. Does anyone know what they're doing? They're planting the mall over. Around the time of the Revolution, there were many Tory sympathizers in the area. One of them was named Parker. And he helped the British by drawing a map famously called the Parker Spy Map, indicating where Washington's troops were in Valley Forge, 1777. And right here, located, is Barry's, which is the King of Prussia Inn. Now, legend has it that the King of Prussia Inn was a place for spies of both sides. It was located in a place where Folks from Valley Forge could make the journey. It was a day's ride from Philadelphia, so it was doable. But spies were everywhere, but so were the militia. If I go back to this other picture, I told you about the Thomas Reese house here. What I didn't tell you about was the Reeseville Tannery back here. Again, very active in the Revolutionary War period. We think at the time of the Revolution there were 10 people living in the tavern, most of them children. So when you think about General Washington meeting with his men in the tavern, it might have been difficult. History suggests that they met in the tannery. Before the tannery was torn down, and you can see the road, but the house is gone, and the summer kitchen, which was the tannery. The main beam in the building had initials from Washington and his generals. And sadly, it was demolished while the owner was trying to find a truck to haul it away. So another piece of history that we don't have anymore. But it's highly likely that, that he met with his generals in the tannery. As well as, I think, probably the inn, because one of the main reasons they may have put the sign up that said King of Prussia Inn was to lure the wealthy Hessians. And Germans did come here with a lot of money, and it's quite possible that that sign was put there to get them in here to spend some money.
Why do they refer to this building as Berry's?
He was the innkeeper at the time.
So perhaps at the time that map was drawn, it wasn't officially called the King of Prussia Inn, but
That's
maybe,
correct.
maybe Berry's Inn or something like
That's
that?
correct. We don't know the name of the inn. The town was Reeseville at that time, and so we don't know, but you're probably right. It was just before, the map was probably drawn just before it became King of Prussia, or the sign went up. We don't know. 1803 to 1830, there's the King of Prussia Inn directly in front of you, and this is not a bad rendering by Amies. This would be approaching from Valley Forge on Gulf Road, and not a bad representation of how the town looked. It was beginning to prosper, beginning to grow, and it's kind of a wonderful, wonderful picture of a good place in time. And this is a nice picture later on in the 19th century, almost at the turn of the 20th century. But you can see that. Where's my cursor? There we are. Here's the inn. Again, this is the spring house. That's a pump right there. The horses are at the wagon shed. Over here is the wheelwright. Over here is the general store. And just out of the picture is Dr. Pauling's office. We're looking toward Norristown here. That's another thing about King of Prussia, about its growth. Everything was here for the traveler. You could mend your wagon. You could get a hearty meal. You could get a place to sleep. You could feed your horses. You had a blacksmith here as well. It was like a rest stop on the turnpike. Had everything that you needed. Again, a day's ride from Philadelphia, so if you're going east or west through the Great Valley, this was a great place to stop overnight, make sure you had everything you needed, and hit the road at first light. This is kind of a nice rendering, a little out of time. The man on horseback is heading south on King of Prussia Road, right in front of the inn. Sweetsford Road, left to right, heading toward Norristown to the left. Brings us back to a much slower paced time. This was actually done from a contemporary postcard, probably from the 40s. So, and you can see the back porch to the right there that has been filled in. It would not have been this way in the time that it's represented in this sketch. But that's all they had to go on. And I think it's kind of interesting. Some of our more interesting shots from the late 19th, early 20th century. Notice the Bell telephone sign on the left, lower left, and the folks dressed up, maybe waiting for a stagecoach. But again, very interesting turn of the century photograph. This is probably our very best one that we own. I believe this was 1899 to 1901. The lamppost on the left is gone, obviously. The lamphead, though, does still exist at the Thomas Rees house. More of the outbuildings, giving you a kind of an interesting look at how the town was growing. We see telephone poles and very interesting time. More of the outbuildings, which I find are fascinating because we all look at the King of Prussia Inn and that's kind of it. But these other buildings, as I said before, contributed to the success of the food and drink and lodging establishment by being able to care for other aspects of travel. And as we jump into the 20th century, the inn lost its liquor license back in 1916. Don't know exactly why. Some sort of shenanigans that made them lose their liquor license. Alexander Crockett, who owned the property next door, his house was where Chili's is essentially right now. Got the license back, much to the dismay of many of the town people, because the men, the workers, the brothers, the sons were all hanging out at the inn, drinking. And they were a little concerned when the license came back, but he was able to restore the tavern license. This was presented to us a couple of years ago by John Crockett, and we appreciate him finding it at a garage sale. And getting it back to us. So many steps in between to make that happen. Just wonderful. We're thrilled to get it. And as you can see, the tavern room was a busy place. What can I tell you about this picture? Some happy people, except the woman in the back who didn't want her picture taken. Mint juleps were the drink of the house. They grew the mint right outside in the back. Clarence Williams, on the right-hand side, was said to have brought the recipe up from South Carolina, where he was born and raised. And he stayed here till the very end, through the 40s and 50s, and brought his wonderful mint julep along with him.
Was he the innkeeper?
No, he was a bartender and waiter.
Okay.
Featured in their Christmas cards, and I mean, he was a famous personality, and people came in for this incredible mint julep that he made, kind of a new thing to the area, and they loved Clarence Williams.
But he wasn't the owner.
He was not the owner.
Okay.
Anna Heist Waters was the owner at that time. She was the last owner, and she was the one that closed the inn in 1952 and moved it to, for a very short time, to across the river to Route 363, Trooper Road, and Ridge Pike.
Really?
I got to meet him there once. I was very tiny, but he brought out the mint juleps to my parents. This is 30s. The truck on the left says Norris Laundry. Bustling place. Busy, busy, busy. When you have a historic site, you're going to have travelers. The advent of the automobile, what did people do? They bought one and they traveled. Added to that was having a place for lodging and food, and that double shot worked very, very well in establishing this town. All around pretty much this inn.
Was that Valley Forge beer on that sign?
It was, yes. I actually have just acquired some new pictures that show that sign a lot more
That's
prominently.
the Norristown beer?
Yep. So, we're looking down the valley, we're looking northwest, and you can see all the things ahead. If we had a crystal ball back in 1951, we never could have imagined all this in one small place. But again, look how flat it is. Of course it's a great place to locate roads. Of course it's a great place to locate a town. And all these roads coming together meant one thing: growth. Also necessitated changing the configuration of the roadways. We have, let me get my cursor up here. Here we are. This is the old Swedesford Road right here, heading toward Norristown, okay? Here's the old Gulf Road, heading toward Gulf Mills. Look at that intersection. That was a dangerous intersection. It had to be squared off and straightened out. There wasn't even a traffic light, just the word stop painted in the road. So the road was squared off. Here's Chili's over here as a point of reference. The road was to be squared off, but look what was in the way. Our King of Prussia Inn. The King of Prussia Historical Society was created to save the King of Prussia Inn. Groups got together and worked with PennDOT, who then actually owned the structure, to see if it could be saved. And their solution was to maroon it on an island in between the north and southbound lanes of 202. Now, why couldn't we have gone around into the cow pasture? I have no idea. And since then, that's what they do. But that was not to be with King of Prussia. So as we look northwest, coming from Gulf Mills on Gulf Road, you can see how it went straight across. General store on the right, and Peacock Gardens, or the old Dr. Pauling's house on the left. The inn is out of picture on the left, the upper left. Here they are squaring it off, and this is kind of the day of reckoning. Early 1952, when everything changed. You see a lot of filling stations there, at least 4. There's probably another one that's just out of picture. But that kind of is an iconic image of when things changed forever. This is just in front of the Tilted Kilt. There was a little island there. I love the picture. This is it, last stop to Turnpike. And the Turnpike entrance back then was down by Creed's. That was part of Gulf Road, and you had access immediately to the Memorial Arch, so that's where it ended initially. And you would follow Gulf Road right to Valley Forge and to your Turnpike entrance. And we can see what happened shortly after that. That's gone. And construction has begun. The outbuildings are gone. And the inn is marooned and closed. And Waters announced the closing of the King of Prussia Inn Saturday, June 28th, 1952. She would open July 8th at the new location in Ridge Pike and Trooper Road. Now, it didn't do real well. It was only open for a few years. Her failing health, and I think the fact that folks just didn't want to travel that far for an evening of drinking, and there were other establishments. The Peacock Gardens was still here, although being limited in size because of the roads again. But I think their crowd didn't follow them to their new location.
Is there a picture of that inn?
I don't have one. It's kind of a holy grail. I would like to find one of those. I was there once as a child, I recall, but don't remember what it looked like.
Did you always go to inns and things as a child? or-
I did. I drove myself. A little pedal car. This is in the mid-50s, and you can see the inn is stranded and shut down. Pretty much ignored. And as businesses, you see Howard Johnson's to the right of the inn. Again, the Peacock Inn, Peacock Gardens on the left. Things are building up around it, and it's forgotten.
Now, when this occurred, did the Waters family still own it, or did the state of Pennsylvania acquire it?
The state of Pennsylvania acquired it for a song.
So they didn't take it by eminent domain, they paid for it, and the Waters went on their merry way.
Right, and through the work of the original Historical Society, they were able to keep it from being torn down. That was the first thought. We're going to tear it down. It had been in operation for almost 200 years, and they're going to tear it down. Continuous operation for 200 years.
So it was just the Historical Society that, at the time, that was able to prevent it from the destruction?
Pretty much, and local residents too, many local residents. I have a letter from an angry resident who said it should be torn down immediately, but that's another story. When I get his permission to publish it, I sure will. But there were, not everyone loved the place, but if you loved it, you loved it.
So it seems like the state just, because of public sentiment, just decided not to tear it down and to make it an island for whatever reason.
Correct. We're not going to tear it down, but you're not going to be able to use it.
I saw the highway construction plans there, and they had the plans that were going to tear it down.
Yeah.
And then on the plans, they showed a change after the efforts of the King of Prussia Historical Society. They moved the northbound over towards the Howard Johnson. That's got kind of a belly in the road there to leave it there as an island. So it was sort of like, if they had already planned to tear it down, but the last ditch, they said, okay, we'll leave it. We're not doing anything more than that, but we'll leave it.
But it stayed there for over 45 years.
Right. Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of create the case in my mind that just the long run. Yeah.
And it was saved. Here we are in 1960, pretty much nothing happening. Again, building up around to the right, you can see a new motel, General Lafayette, and Valley Forge Tavern to the left in the back. Totally forgotten, and totally, George Brewster can talk about some things that he found. He was in there before it was moved. And I have some pictures of it, but you could get some first-hand information from him as well. Now, they did fix it up a little bit for the bicentennial. They knocked the plaster off the outside, and Leon Altimos, who used to have the Sheraton in Valley Forge, and a developer in the area, donated Portland cement so they could re-point the building. Portland cement is a very strong material, and it probably held the place together very well and helped in the move, essentially. But you can see the section on the left with the gray stones. We're looking north, so this is the southern side that you haven't seen before, but you can see the King of Prussia marble on the left, and be sure to take a look at that when you leave. There's the, to the lower right, is the antique shop and general store, the first post office, et cetera, part of the original town. Pretty much everything was still intact at this point.
Mike, is the whole thing on that side King of Prussia marble, or is it just bits and pieces or sections?
You know, I haven't gone out to count it, but the majority of it is King of Prussia marble.
Okay.
It's clearly King of Prussia marble there. And if you drive by the Thomas Reese house, right across the street where the carriage house and the barns are located, one of the barns is made completely out of King of Prussia marble.
Okay.
Now, as you can see, although the outside looked pretty good, they did nothing to the interior. So the elements, and it wasn't heated or cooled, so the elements took their toll rather quickly. as nature's reclaiming this building. 21st century and beyond. Again, we go back to this iconic picture from 1928 from Victor Dallen's flyover. The original town intact. But when you go from this to this, you need to get people to and from where they're going. So again, the inn is faced with a critical issue. Let me point out some landmarks here. Here's King of Prussia Road. The Thomas Rees House is up about here. King of Prussia Road came through. It would have ended right here, so the inn would have sat right about here. The Tilted Kilt, the general store, post office would have been right about here. So with this change, you can see we have to move people in and out of the town. They're expanding the mall. Things are going on to the north and to the east. Lots of building going on, and this inn is right smack dab in the middle again. And the idea was to take it from its former location and move it about a half a mile to its new location. No bridges in the way. The little stream had to be, the bridge over that had to be shorn up, but there were, you know, if they went any farther, they would run into the railroad. Pretty much the only idea was this, this piece of land owned by Pico in their right of way. $1.63 million was raised from the Arthur Powell Foundation, PennDOT, and Kravco for the move. And more than $400,000 from the community for the restoration of the interior. We think that money went for the restoration of this interior after the move. Because as you'll see, you not only had the building shorn up from the outside, so nothing would happen to it, the inside looked pretty much the same way. So a lot of work had to go into this, as you see now, from what you see in this picture. That's this stairway right over here, and the doorway leading into the hall, and taken from just about where I'm sitting. So there it is. Big project, as I mentioned earlier. Archaeological digs prior to the move yielded over 3,000 objects. Many of them were shards and sherds, difference between pottery and glass. And a lot of it were little pieces of things that were swept out the back doors and just crushed down with people and animals walking on it. So here we are on the move. Let me see a show of hands of anyone that was there that day. Very good. So you wanted to see what happened to it from the inside. So that's good that you're here. Thank you. And thank you for everybody taking photographs.
Which year it was done?
I'm sorry?
Which year it was done?
This was 2000.
In 2000.
In August. And there we are making the turn onto Gulf Road. They almost lost it. It started to lean on that turn. They had men with soapy water soaping up the tires so they'd move against the curb and not get caught. All kinds of things. And these are all on hydraulic jacks, so they could stabilize it minimally. But they counted on it being level from start to finish, and sure enough, one of the greatest engineering feats ever in the history of Pennsylvania. What you had was, number one, saving a historic structure. And number two, a great feat in highway history to be able to expand the roads after they saved the building. And here we are. Notice that King of Prussia marble on the right-hand side. Pretty interesting that the two brothers owned the contiguous properties, and Jonathan Brooke, which Brooks Road is named after, but it's spelled incorrectly, had the quarry right there. and lived in Thomas Rees's house. He was the next owner of Thomas Rees's house. So he mined the quarry, and that's when the addition came up. Kind of interesting. And there's the King of Prussia marble. Don't let them tell you it's Valley Forge bluestone. There is no such thing. It's King of Prussia marble.
Is the slightly oranger part the original building?
That's local fieldstone.
Is that the original building?
Yes, it is. It is. It's where we're standing right now. King of Prussia marble graces the Capitol in Norristown, Fort Mifflin, the Senate Reception Hall in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C.,
Girard College in Philadelphia.
Girard College, and many, many high-end fireplaces throughout the Northeast. It was the signaling of a change from wood to stone as a building material of choice. And the quarry and the chapel over at Valley Forge. Now, if they had bluestone over there, why did they come here to get it? Interesting. But yeah, it went everywhere. It was a famous, famous quarry, and the stone they exported went all over the place.
Is it still a very big hole?
It's been filled in. You can see outcroppings at Brooks and Croton Road. You can see many outcroppings of the stone still today. And that was the back end of the property where Thomas Rees lived. If you keep going west on Croton Road, you'll see King of Prussia Road to the left. Don't take that one, keep going. And the dead end side is to the right. And down on the left-hand side is the Thomas Rees house, still there. And I just wanted to point out a few things. I have a personal love for this place for a couple of reasons. One of the things, in 2015, we were contacted by the storage place over on Henderson Road, and they said, we have some things that you might be interested in. We're getting ready to take this apart and get rid of it. Would you like to come and see? And sure enough, we walked in, and on the picture on the right, you see the King of Prussia Inn sign that hung out in the front, and also the old bar. The bar front is intact. It's about 16 feet long, and our good friends at Wayne Moving and Storage have it stored there at no charge to us. They came and got it with a truck, and we had to pay for that. But we always wondered what happened to the bar, and it was only by them calling us and saying, hey, are you interested? And me saying, yeah, of course, I'll be right over, that it happened. So, and I don't know how many things don't happen, you know, that you hope would, but here's one where we got lucky. So that'll be featured in our program in the spring, finds from the archive from 2015. Also, the Chester Valley Trail will be right back here. We would love to see this as a trailhead. Makes good sense. Interpretive signage could be a wonderful thing for folks using that trail. It's interesting, these trails that are cropping up are actually bringing industry in. You're seeing lodging and food and things crop up near these trails because they're family events when people go out to use these trails. And we're hoping that the King of Prussia Inn can be one stop along there. A very personal note, my mom and dad celebrated their wedding reception here. And we grew up at the Thomas Rees house. So this was all close by to us. My mom lived up the street, met my dad and got married and celebrated their wedding reception here. We figured out from these photographs that it was on the second floor. And there's Clarence Williams with his famous mint juleps. And everybody's happy. Both sets of grandparents, they're very happy. But I was asked to hang the picture in the room where the reception took place. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm proud of the fact that they asked me to do that. And thank you, Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. You've been good friends over the years to the society. And just when you thought you knew it all, you acquire a business card with the name W.A. Pearson, who I have no idea who he was. It's not in any timeline that I have, and It's making me crazy, but we'll figure it out. The only thing that I can get close to is the phone number, Norristown 1993W. It's very close to this, this ad that I have, probably from the 40s. So he could have been running the inn for Anna Heist Waters, but I don't know for sure. There's another, this building always has places conundrums before you. And there we have it. It was a brief history. I have a much more expanded program that I'd be happy to do sometime, going through the exact timeline of what happened here, what happened when, and the growth of the town. But this is your brief history of the building that you're in. Do we have any questions? I would urge you to walk around on the first floor and take a look at the building and notice the differences between the old and the newer section. But before we go, I wanted to talk about some of the programs we have coming up for 2016. Next month, Father Richard Bauman at Old Swedes Church presents Swedes in the Delaware Valley and along the Schuylkill. Very interesting local history program. Could be very good. We meet the second Saturday of the month at 2 p.m. at Christ Old Swedes Church, and we would love to have you there. Directions, GPS coordinates, etc., are on our website. In March, we have Jim Brazel, who's a member also of Tredyffrin Easttown Historical Society, agreeing to do his program on the Reading Railroad's Chester Valley line. He's done extensive research and some wonderful photographs. So, excuse me, if you're wondering about this old railroad that used to be back here and crossed 202 right at the Shane line, right near where Petco is, you might want to come and see that. There was a railroad station about every mile from between here and Downingtown. Fascinating little railroad, very, very interesting. And then we have Michael Toll, who's coming in April to present towns up and down the Schuylkill River. What towns made it and what towns didn't, you know, talking about Reading and Pottstown and Phoenixville and Conshohocken, and bringing it all together for us. So that's, and he will also be selling copies of his book, and that's what the book is about. It's about the towns along the Schuylkill River. And then, of course, in May, from the archive, featuring some of the things that we collected in 2015, including Ed Dibbett's collection of things that were donated to us by his family upon his death. June, we're planning a field trip to Valley Forge Military Academy. They have a museum, and we're joining the Radnor Historical Society and Tredyffrin Easttown Historical Society. It's a great time to come and meet folks from neighboring societies and talk history. Plus, they have a pretty nice little museum there at the Military Academy. So we're looking forward to that. Slim the Lineman in September. That was my grandfather. He built that power line from the Conowingo Dam up to Bridgeport. One of 11 kids from South Carolina that came up here. Most of them were linemen. I have some wonderful old photographs, and I have a book by William Haynes called Slim the Lineman. And according to the folks at Philadelphia Electric Company, it was loosely based on his life. Also, a movie was made with Henry Fonda and Pat O'Brien called Slim the Lineman. And if we have time, we'll show the movie. It's very short, but also kind of interesting. So there's a lot of background there, and we're going to start with why the valley was the valley, et cetera, and move in from there. Young historians, Frank?
Nothing yet.
We're still putting the last half of the year together. We do know that St. Lucia on February 13th at the church is always a wonderful event done in candlelight and a recreation of one of the original services, maybe.
But it is a religious service.
It is, yes.
Okay.
It's presented by the church and recreating one of the original services that legend has it that General Washington came and was observed in the service. Although we are having trouble with the documentation of that, and I'm going to leave it at that. It's a wonderful service, wonderful, warm, inviting service, followed by wonderful, terrific refreshments, and it's a great time for everyone. If you want to get into the holiday spirit, that's a great place to start.
Michael, do the more. Give everybody a laugh.
All right. We have some quotes about the inn, and the first one is, she hopes the inns you stayed at didn't have bed bugs like the King of Prussia Inn down the road here. Lady Martha Washington, 9 February 1778. Alexander Hamilton and the commissioners from the Continental and British armies met at the King of Prussia Tavern on March 10, 1778 to discuss the exchange of prisoners, but no cartel of exchange could be arrived at. And that is from Alfred Hoyt Bill, Princeton University, 1952. And the King of Prussia Inn played host to many important military figures. General Washington and some of his friends held Masonic meetings in one of the second floor rooms, and it was at the inn that, at the request of Washington, the Marquis de Lafayette joined the Masons. Now, I didn't bring that up because I can't prove it.
Just keep a laugh.
Washington's Masonic Lodge was in Virginia, and there's no real proof that that event even happened. However, don't tell that to the Masons, because they believe it, and not only do they believe it wholeheartedly. Right after this building was moved, they held a Masonic service here to honor that moment, and so they firmly believe it's true. They covered the windows. It was a typical Masonic secret service, and they commemorated that event right here. I heard that it happened in the kitchen, in front of the fireplace. Some say it was in the second floor room, but none of those can be substantiated. I want to put that out there too, but they're kind of interesting and fun, like many old stories. That concludes our program. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions? We're going to hopefully come back to this wonderful place.
Emma.
Oh, I'm sorry. Emma.
There's nothing to do with the inn, but the end of Long Road, there's a stone marker. It had 17 on it. And when they were doing some road work, some lady in South Gulf Road on the opposite side saved the stone and put it in her front yard. The only thing is, they tell me that it's 17 miles to Philadelphia on this side of South Gulf. But if it's on the opposite side, it goes to Reading. So the sign should be put back at the end of Long Road.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I wondered if our group would have any influence in putting it back. Is that they were just widening? It's not too long ago that this happened. I mean, you would remember it was there.
Sure, sure.
So,
Well, Scott's working on relocating another sign. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
On Moore Road, there's a sign, it's like there's the blue and gold markers, but this one's black and silver, so it's not one of those official state markers. And it's at the Moore House, where Washington, when he was president in Philadelphia, he came out during a period and to visit the Moors, that he met them during when he was here with Valley Forge, and he came and went fishing in Trout Creek, and that he wrote about that, so there's pretty good evidence of that letter's been preserved. So there's a marker there. We're talking about they're proposing improvements and making a park along First Avenue, and we're talking to the Business Improvement District to move the sign up to First Avenue. It would still be on the Moore property area, and still be along that creek, but it would be a place where more people walking and you'd be able to see the sign.
Interesting. So let's put that on our list, for things. If we're trying to make the town historically accurate, let's start with the signage, and see where we go. So Emma, thank you. That's something that I didn't notice recently, but it's nice that it was saved. I have pictures of it, but that's interesting that it's still there.
I didn't realize that the marking of it, though, the 17 miles on this side of the road is to Philadelphia, but if it's on the other side, the distance is to Reading. And my father told me that, so.
Interesting.
Speaking of markers in the railroad, I noticed the bridge down by the railroad on Valley Forge Road out near the towers, you know, where the railroad used to come across. That bridge must have been hit
Yes.
again recently, so it's severely damaged. There's a stone marker in the bridge that says when it was erected, it goes back pretty far. And when I saw how badly hit that bridge was, I wondered, you know, I worried that something might happen to that stone. So who's responsible for the bridge? Is that a county? I think it says
It's a
it's a county bridge.
It's a PennDOT road.
Yeah, whoever hit it right at the stone, I was looking at it.
They hit the stone?
The stone is gone. I know.
Destroyed, pulverized? you
I don't
think?
know. I keep meaning to take a walk down there and try to look underneath. If it fell, is it broken?
Yeah.
How bad is it? But they hit right where that stone
Oh,
is.
Oh, boy.
it's terrible.
Maybe they wanted to stone.
Well, it'd be a way to get it, you hit it with your car.
Take it away in the grill.
Well, I took a picture of it not so long ago, but still,
It was
I'm-
1874.
yeah, something like that, yeah.
Because it was, there was another sign there that said 1874. I used to see it when I
Yeah,
went to work.
that's
And
the one I
that's
took,
missing. That's
18
missing too, the one before it.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, there's one before it.
There's
that's
another
missing.
plaque, but it's hidden by the guardrail on the other side.
Oh, I'll have to go out there and look at it more
Yeah.
carefully and see
The
what's
guardrail's
there.
on top of it, so I don't know how you would read it.
If it's not there, then maybe the county would have grabbed it.
Hopefully.
See, that's the things we have to keep on top of. I hate it when you hear about signs or things disappearing, like you had a picture of the motor lodge in there. I keep thinking of that sign that was on the side of the motor lodge on that room that said John F. Kennedy's up there. What happened to that?
Right. We never saw that. So many things disappear. You know, we're just lucky for people that choose to contact us, and we're so grateful when that happens. But yeah, always things are lost. And you know, when we get to the point where our parents are downsizing or moving to other facilities, and the families haul the dumpster in and everything goes out in a long weekend, you lose a lot of things through that. We're trying to get the word out, and often we're successful. So I'm thrilled for each little win, and I lament the losses terribly. Anything else, folks? Thank you so much for joining us here at the King of Prussia Inn.
Are people allowed to go upstairs? People can walk around?
Everything's closed. It's really not